he wasn't a good band leader.
Right.
You know, he didn't have the personal touch with the musicians. You know,
I
Ronnie
see.
and I used to sometimes have to go and steal eggs here in New York to survive.
Really?
Because we weren't given any money.
It's your mind, take your mind and roll my
I first heard The Shapes of Things with Jeff Beck playing, and I thought, my God, who the hell is this? This shouldn't be allowed, it's too good.
By any measure, Jeff Beck was an unrelenting seeker of tones, of textures, of something beyond the limits of genre. A man who treated the electric guitar not so much as an instrument, but as a volatile partner to be coaxed, tamed, and often provoked. His legacy is sprawling and richly idiosyncratic. Yet woven into the mythology of his career is a quiet, rather British tale of estrangement, one that begins, ironically, with a novelty pop hit and ends with decades of stony silence between two giants of British rock. "He's never spoken to me since," John Paul Jones remarked in a 1977 interview. "It was Hi-Ho Silver Lining. I did the arrangement for it and I played bass." The remark, typically understated, belied the depth of the fallout between the two men. In truth, the story of Hi-Ho Silver Lining offers a rare window into Jeff Beck's famously mercurial temperament.
Flying across the country and getting fat.
His fiercely held artistic standards, and the awkward collisions that can occur when worlds of experimental rock and commercial pop collide. It also serves as an early glimpse into the frictions that would surround the formation of Led Zeppelin, whose shadow looms large over this chapter of Beck's life. Recorded in early 1967, Hi-Ho Silver Lining was never meant to be a defining moment for Jeff Beck. A former Yardbird recently turned solo artist, Beck was still finding his footing, trying to shape a sound that felt truer to his restless musical instincts than the straightforward R&B and blues rock that had dominated his past. The song itself, penned by American writers Scott English and Larry Weiss, was pure bubblegum, infectiously catchy, irredeemably silly, and completely at odds with the direction Beck wanted to pursue. Yet he was persuaded to record it, largely at the urging of producer Mickey Most, who saw chart potential and was keen to polish Beck's image into something more marketable. John Paul Jones, then an in-demand session arranger and bassist, was brought in to flesh out the arrangement. It was a quick session, Jones would later recall. Nothing dramatic, just another job at the time. I liked working with Jeff. He was already experimenting with sounds and tones. You could tell he wasn't going to be content just knocking out blues numbers, but Beck was never fond of the track. In fact, he loathed it. He reportedly completed the recording in one take and left the studio in a fury. Years later, when reflecting on his biggest chart hit, he quipped, "It was like having a pink toilet seat hanging around my neck for the rest of my fucking life." The embarrassment wasn't just about artistic compromise, it cut deeper. Beck felt misrepresented, humiliated even, by a song that painted him as a pop lightweight rather than a trailblazing guitarist. And somewhere in the fallout, Jones became collateral damage. It is unclear whether Jones bore the brunt of Beck's ire simply for his involvement, or whether there was a more specific grievance. Either way, Beck severed ties. "He never called, never wrote, never said thanks or goodbye," Jones told a friend in the late 70s. "It was as if I'd betrayed him just by showing up." The silence was absolute. Though the two men would orbit similar musical worlds in the years to follow, their paths would rarely, if ever, cross again in any meaningful way. For Beck, the episode seemed to confirm a deeply held conviction, that the integrity of one's music must never be compromised for the sake of commercial appeal. For Jones, It was a puzzling and somewhat painful fracture, one of several quiet casualties in the turbulent landscape of British rock. Complicating the picture further is the tangled history between Beck and the band that would soon become Led Zeppelin. Before the foursome officially formed, the ties among Beck, Page, Jones, and even Bonham were already rich and fraught. In 1966, Beck and Jimmy Page had briefly overlapped in the Yardbirds, sharing guitar duties in what was, at the time, a thrilling but chaotic experiment. Their collaboration yielded Beck's Bolero, an instrumental track recorded with John Paul Jones on bass, Keith Moon on drums, and Nicky Hopkins on piano. It was, by many accounts, a precursor to what Led Zeppelin would become. Beck had floated the idea of forming a supergroup with Page and Moon, potentially with Jones in tow, but the plan never materialized. Moon returned to The Who, and Page, ever ambitious, quietly laid the foundations for his own project. When Led Zeppelin's debut album arrived in 1969, Beck was gobsmacked. Much of it felt eerily familiar.
Woman, I don't know which way to go.
Tracks like You Shook Me and I Can't Quit You Baby were blues covers Beck had already recorded on his 1968 album Truth, featuring Rod Stewart and Ronnie Wood. The arrangements, the production, even the sequencing. It all felt like Page had borrowed heavily from Beck's blueprint and repackaged it with more polish and muscle.
Robert Plant and Jimmy Page, did you ever sit them down and say, boys, these are songs we open with. These are songs we do. Could you fucking calm down for Christ's sake?
No, maybe we should have. But
Yeah.
Robert's a good mate of mine. I love him dearly.
Jimmy just nicked the whole bloody sound, Beck once said, half in jest, but with a bitterness that lingered. He had the same band, bass, drums, a screamer up front, and then he did the same songs, but with a better budget and a clearer plan. It didn't help that John Paul Jones was now Page's right-hand man, not Beck's. The sense of betrayal wasn't just personal, it was artistic. His innovations, his sound, had been lifted and rebranded as something new. And the man who had quietly arranged Hi-Ho's Silver Lining was now helping architect the rise of Zeppelin. Despite all this, Truth remains one of the most influential albums of the late 60s. Recorded before Zeppelin's debut, it laid out a vision of hard rock that was bluesy, improvisational, and sonically adventurous. It featured a young Rod Stewart on vocals, Ronnie Wood on bass, and Beck playing with a ferocity and fluidity that still sounds urgent today. But Beck wasn't interested in standing still. If Truth was a blueprint, it was one he quickly discarded. By the early 1970s, he was veering into jazz fusion, recording ambitious instrumental albums like Blow by Blow and Wired, produced in part by George Martin. Yes, that George Martin. Jeff was the most unpredictable musician I ever worked with, Martin later said. He didn't just want to play the guitar, he wanted to explore it, stretch it, twist it until it said something new. Beck's restless spirit meant he never quite achieved the commercial clout of his peers, but his influence ran deep. Guitarists from David Gilmour to Eddie Van Halen and Tom Morello have cited him as a formative inspiration. Yet for all his innovation, Beck remained deeply sensitive to how his work was received, and by whom. The memory of Hi-Ho Silver Lining clearly haunted him. In a 2016 interview, Beck reflected, "I thought it was a joke, but it stuck, didn't it? People still shout it at gigs. I hated it then, and I hate it now." Time has a way of softening some feuds, but the silence between Beck and Jones remained unbroken. Even as both men aged into elder statesmen of British rock, they never shared a stage, never exchanged public acknowledgements, never buried the hatchet. When Beck was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2009, he shared the stage with Jimmy Page for a rousing rendition of Beck's Bolero.
Because he's done so much for rock and roll, and he always will. Come on, Jeff.
It was a moment of reconciliation of sorts. an acknowledgement of shared history and mutual respect. But Jones was not present, and Beck, characteristically, made no mention of him. In interviews, Jones has always been gracious about Beck. "He was one of the greats," he said following Beck's death in 2023. "A genuine original. I never understood what happened between us. Maybe I never will." Beck, for his part, never revisited the issue publicly. Whether out of pride, discomfort, or simple forgetfulness, he chose not to reopen old wounds. Jeff Beck's story is one of brilliance, but also of stubbornness. He walked away from bands, projects, collaborators, even hits, if he felt they compromised his vision. He cared about tone, integrity, sonic texture. What he did not care for was compromise. And in the case of Hi-Ho Silver Lining, that conviction came at the cost of a working relationship that could have evolved into something richer. There's an irony in the fact that Beck's most enduring chart success was the song he hated most, arranged by a man he'd never speak to again. But perhaps that's the nature of genius. It rarely takes the path of least resistance. It burns bridges in the pursuit of something new. It sacrifices comfort for honesty. In a way, the rift between Beck and Jones stands as a small but telling footnote in the history of British rock, an emblem of how high the stakes can feel when you're not just making music, but trying to make art. For Jones, it may always remain a mystery. For Beck, it was likely just one more compromise he couldn't stomach. And for the rest of us, it's a reminder that even the brightest sparks can sometimes light fires that no one wants to put out.